Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, and of course the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we essentially did manage able to take down, so far anyway, I believe we did somehow manage able to take down, I would say 7 of those specific tough variants for certain Guardians, or something like that. Mind you, it's been about 2 days ago since I actually have last played this. I mean, for the most part though, it's about the fact that originally I was going to able to actually tackle for the last few of those tougher variants for certain Guardians, but let's face it though, they're just optional, and because of that though, I just don't feel like trying to able to actually show those off for the sake of the forms of this particular ending conclusion of this. So, anyway, so today for this video, speaking of the ending conclusion, is that today's the day is the true finale of our Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers before we move on to the next batch of Sonic Let's Plays to come. Specifically Sonic Superstars and all that stuff. So because of that, though, we're about to able to end things off everything, or should I say, we're about to able to take on the final boss, or should I say, the true final boss, in the forms of Sonic Frontiers, for the Final Horizon DLC update. So as a result, we're about to take care of that, and once we're done with that, we will surely able to actually end the game for real. So because of that, yeah, not much else explanations for the sake of time anyway. So because of that though, I'm just pretty excited able to actually just to get this game finished before we move on to the next game in the franchise. Specifically, like I said before, with Sonic Superstars and pretty much any other Sonic games to come. So because of that, so I'm pretty excited for it. So because of that, and another thing too is about the fact that I can't even believe by saying this is that we're actually getting very close to the halfway point in terms of the forms of December this year. So as a result of that particular matter though, yeah, I don't think it's possible for me to able to take care of the forms of Tank Plus, because as a result, the defense is way too high for certain battles like this, and especially noticeable that, well, again, the only rewards you do get if you manage able to take down those Guardians anyway, is the advice for the final battle to come. But because of that though, yeah, that's what I can really say about that. Especially concerning for the fact that, yeah, I was trying, but it's just about the fact that it's maybe a bit too much for me. So because of that, maybe because I'm still pretty much used to with the forms of, the regular Guardian battles from the base game, because they are very self-explanatory, and on top of that, that could be also applies for Battle Rush mode as well, just because I'm also used to that, especially concerning for the fact that obviously I play as Sonic the whole way through, and on top of that, the strategies are super duper easy, assuming of course you know exactly what to do. But for this particular battles like this, it's just way too chaotic, so because of that, yeah, I was doing decent enough for the sake of the forms to try to take down certain Guardians after all. So, let me just do this for the third and probably the third and final time, or third time's the charm, but if it doesn't work too well, then we'll just jump straight to the point, to the forms of the final battle to come. So because of that, so yeah, a few things I want to explain for this point today is, potentially speaking though, is that today's date of course is the 14th of December today, in some cases in 2023 today. And if you can't tell already, nah, I don't think it's possible for me to able to actually take care of the forms of Tank Plus, because it is way too difficult. So yeah, we'll skip it for now, and I think that pretty much takes care of the forms of certain battle encounters anyway, because I just show everything else off, but I just found this to be unbeatable at times. So, anyway, so with that being said, let's make our way back to the forms of this particular tower over there. So just in case about the fact that we'll easily switch over back to Sonic, but before we take care of the forms of the true final boss in the game, we need to make sure we need to able to max out our rings counter first, just in case if you don't do this at all, then obviously you're about to get wrecked easily. So because of that, what I'm sure enough though is about the fact that the entire battle itself, against with the forms of Supreme coming up, it might play exactly the same as before, but except the noticeable differences being is that we're able to see a different cutscene, and on top of that, we'll easily get the 7th and the final Chaos Emerald thanks to Eggman once again, except the noticeable differences being is that we now somehow managed able to obtain 6 Chaos Emeralds as opposed to 5 from the likes of in a base game. So Anyways, let's max out our rings, and, well, to be speaking of, this is it. This is gonna be the true finale of Sonic Frontiers. I mean, it's a nice little enjoyable ride at the end of the day. I mean, sure, it does have some very annoying moments from time to time, specifically with the forms of this pinball machine in the forms of Chaos Island, and on top of that, there's also certain cyberspace stages are kind of tricky to able to actually get an S rank from sometimes. But regardless of everything else though, and also don't even get me started on the forms of climbing those towers, for the sake of the forms of this particular DLC, although it's not so bad in during the forms within our island, I think is what it says anyway, despite the fact that it's been a very long time since we've actually been into that particular stuff. Although, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can't able to actually access the music jukebox feature for some reason in this particular DLC or something. Although I haven't really exactly tested this out for myself, you see. Well, that's just mainly because I just want to cut to the point for the sake of the forms of trying to get this DLC finished before we move on to the next game. So, anyways, with that being said, let's talk to this particular Master King Coco, and yes, let's proceed to the final battle as we go.
Nice of you to catch up.
Were you successful?
Naturally.
Good. Unfortunately, your friends aren't handling their cyber corruption nearly as well.
Oh, you guys are the best.
What does that make me?
Fashionably late. But hey, you tried.
We're out of time. I command you to save us.
So yes, we've met again, Supreme, after the events of the base game, and for what I can tell, the entire battle remains the same as before, except the noticeable differences this time around though, is that obviously it shows us some more UI icons, specifically with the forms of Lookout Cocos and all that stuff, but aside from all that stuff though, this battle itself remains the same as before, so because of that, and the noticeable differences this time around though, is potentially speaking though, once we're able to take care of the forms of Supreme, that we might come across into a different final boss, so, relatively speaking though, that makes it a little bit of a different for once. Especially, I'm actually really looking forward to this though, especially after the forms of this disappointing, lackluster final boss on the base game, which is of course the end, because obviously I'm still not a big fan of the forms of Ikaruga gameplay style after all, because obviously it contains a lot of frustration, and on top of that, there's a lack of checkpoints during the course of which specific phase you go into. But apart from those aside things though, at the very least the music is quite nice, but aside from that, I just found the end on the base game is very lackluster, and especially noticeable it's very disappointing at the same time. But let's just hope about the fact that the Final Horizon DLC update managed to fix this, and maybe potentially speaking though, thankfully we don't have to worry about just trying to able to deal with this stupid Ikaruga gameplay style, because I'm still not a big fan of that particular stuff. So, obviously, we still managed able to actually beat him, and especially noticeable concerning for the fact that we've already maxed out our level cap for the likes of, 99 level ups for Sonic, for this ring capacity, strength, defense, and speed, of course. So, yeah, that's as far as I can usually think about the forms of Supreme boss fight. It remains the same as before, including by the forms of the Battle Rush mode as well. So, because of that, well, if you think this entire DLC is over, well, it's not over yet.
This shell was once my prison. Now it shall be the avatar of my return. All shall perish. All shall return to order, to oblivion.
Okay, this is interesting. Rather than just going into the forms within outer space, unlike the forms of how it does it on the base game, and able to actually fight against with the end, with the forms of this particular Ikaruka gameplay style, which I'm still not a big fan of. Whilst in here though, if you couldn't tell already, the end planet did somehow manage to able to come down for a bit, and managed able to summon this particular special cable that had somehow attached to the forms of that particular back of its neck of Supreme Titan. So that's actually pretty interesting. I'm guessing because no matter what though, with that particular cable has been inserted, so I'm guessing if no matter what though, is that the Supreme Titan is actually a lot more powerful, and on top of that, that particular transformation for the likes of the forms of Supreme is actually a lot more menacing looking. So, and speaking of transformation, as you can tell, we somehow introduced into ourselves a much more stronger variant for Supersonic. Not Hypersonic though, but rather Supersonic 2, which basically this means is about the fact that we can now able to actually just to take care of the forms that, well, as soon as when this fight is actually about to get started, if you couldn't tell already, we can't able to actually just to pray back at the forms of those projectiles as what that particular at the end decides to able to actually summon those projectiles right back at us. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that if you couldn't tell already, if you manage to get hit by the forms of that particular projectiles, if you couldn't tell, it actually depletes your specific rain counter, if you couldn't tell already, despite the fact that we've already maxed out with the forms of the level caps already. But relatively speaking, I was about the fact that with Supersonic 2, it does now have a different colored eyes, which this time around though, it appears to be by the forms of a blue colored eyes. So, yeah, kind of an interesting transition for that particular different colored eyes for a change, because relatively speaking though, speaking of the forms of the transition, I do really love the fact that every time when the battles usually started, basically though, it did somehow at first did say Supreme again, but ultimately speaking though, it did somehow slowly turn into the end. So yeah, that's actually a pretty cool way to able to noticing this, and thank goodness there was no Ikaruka gameplay style, which I will admit though right away, that this is actually probably the best way to able to end off the game from here, which is especially noticeable about the fact that, well, you can able to actually take control of Supersonic for reals, so no need to worry about the forms of this particular frustration 3 life system for the sake of the forms of that particular Ikaruka gameplay style, as far as I've already addressed that earlier. So either way though, and I have no idea I somehow managed able to fail for that particular, oh jeez, I have to button mash. And of course, just like the forms of how it does it on the Master King Coco's trial, you still need to able to actually deal with the forms of the perfect parry system. But I will admit though right away, with the end as the true final boss in Journey forms of this entire DLC, I will say it actually works quite well. Even though compared to the forms of how it does it on this frustrating Master King Coco's trial that I simply just cannot figure out for myself, even especially concerning for the fact that I just seriously keep on failing most of my time. Mind you, keep this in mind, it's about the fact that we're still going to be experiencing this on hard mode, so as a result, personally speaking though, I have no issues for this point, especially concerning for the fact that, well, to me, this is how it should be done in the first place, you know? Well, maybe I'm a little bit of a nitpicking for the sake of time, because, like I said before, I'm still not a big fan of the forms of this Ikaruka gameplay style, as to be expected. So, it looks like, since that we did somehow activate the side loop with that particular ginormous weapon, And, well, believe it or not, there are some more projectiles is about to try to attack us, but luckily, Sage decides able to join in for a bit, and rather than just trying to able to let her turn into Supreme, unlike the forms of how it does on the base game, so, relatively speaking though, she creates a barrier shield, but it's not too powerful enough. But luckily, both Cyber Amy, as well as Cyber Knuckles and Cyber Tails, decides able to help out throughout the majority of the battle. And relatively speaking though, this is where we come across into, let's just say, the next phase, where basically, despite the fact that his health is almost fully recovered, so this means about the fact that the actual special cable did somehow return, so relatively speaking though, we need to able to take care of the forms of that particular cable, until you're able to realize if you don't take care of it at all, basically though, his health decides to regenerate. So, I will say about the fact no matter what though, thankfully though, it does not take a very long time to able to actually take that particular The End down, unlike the forms of how it does it on the base game, that my god, it took absolute forever to able to deal a certain amount of damage to the forms of The End itself, especially concerning for the fact that, well, like I said before, it's about the fact that it does give me a lot of horrible flashbacks for the sake of the forms of this archaic design choices and stuff like that. So, oh, here's something a little bit more stranger than that. It looks like, I think, we actually ended up in the third and the final phase, at least as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, it looks like we somehow lost the ability to able to actually deal with this part, and, oh, we lost our Super Sonic 2 transformation, and, oh my lord, we lost all of our rings! Well, almost exactly anyway, because as soon as you're able to actually get to this point right here, it looks like that Super Sonic is going to be turning back onto the forms of Super Sonic 2 after all. And by the way, I just really love the forms of this particular, another rendition of the forms of, I would say, I Am Here theme song or something like that. Mind you, it's been about a very long time since we actually got to this point, since during the forms have been a battle rush mode. And by the way, I love that shot, by the way. So, and as you can tell, we're exactly on 100 rings left, so we need to beat this thing as quickly as possible. So because of that, however, here's the catch of this though, there was actually, technically speaking, a yet another time limit, rather than the forms of how the fact that, well, if you couldn't tell already, since that we still need to keep an eye on with the forms of the ring counter after all, this also means you can't spend a long time on this particular fight, because as you can tell, the more you spend wasting your time during the course of this final fight anyway, what happens is that every once in a while, is that certain Sonic's friends' health starts able to depleting after able to take care of the shield, because once the actual health has been completely wrecked by The End, guess what that means, is that you have to able to restart the entire fight all over again. This means you have to restart from the likes of the forms of Supreme all the way up to The End again. So because of that, well, at the very least though, is that if you do somehow manage able to fail on this particular final boss battle, thankfully though, you can able to actually skip certain cutscenes if you like. So I get the horrible feeling about the fact that it looks like, yeah, I'm about to fail on this. Well, not exactly just yet though, but eventually I will decide able to fail on my first attempt, because sometimes I will admit the right way is that the lock-on cursor doesn't like me able to actually lock onto the forms of that particular cable part. Well, there is actually a technique you can able to actually drastically do on this part. And that is about the fact that if you're thinking about the forms within the Kingdom Hearts games, for example, whenever you're trying to able to lock on into something, well, I suppose we'll explain more about it if we manage able to try to do it successfully on the second attempt, if so much more of it desires. So, yeah, unfortunately though, I think that pretty much goes my first attempt anyway though, because for some odd reason is that the stupid lock-on cursor does not seem to like locking onto the cable. So, yeah, there goes that. And again, if you fail on this boss fight, it takes you straight back into the beginning of the specific point. So, hopefully we'll try this again, and thankfully though, it was nowhere near as frustrating as the forms of how it does it from the likes of, well, let's just say during the course of the forms of The End on the base game, because my god, if you failed on that, you have to able to keep on going, because rather than taking it all the way back to the beginning portion of the Supreme boss fight, so you have to deal with this stuff. Well, thankfully though, I can easily manage able to skip certain cinematic cutscenes this time around, so at the very least that's a good thing. So yeah, as you probably already know, is about the fact that while on the subject for this matter though, is that obviously about the fact that today not only marks the forms of the celebration of the release of the forms of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's second DLC, which appears to be by the forms of the Indigo Disc. So as a result, I'm sure that most Pokemon fans out there will be expected able to enjoy that particular stuff. And in addition to that, I can't really remember what's another thing I can probably think about on top of my head, because mind you, it's been about a very long while since I actually mentioned some news related things as far as I can remember. So, but still, I can't even believe my saying this is about the fact that I can't believe we're now at the very end of this particular playthrough. I mean, let's face it though, I did have a really had a radical ride for the sake of the forms of trying to able to experience Sonic Frontiers on the PS4 version most notably, so yeah, I guess that's pretty much as far as I can usually describe about any of those specific matters. So, anyway though, in addition to that, is about the fact that I'm pretty certain, for the sake of time anyway, that it looks like no matter what though, honestly, that's why I can really talk about this. So, but either way though, but then again, I'll explain about the forms of the lock-on cursor system for the sake of the forms of that particular, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to trying to able to lock on to that particular cable section, which by the way, in order to able to take down the cable, is that you have to able to let the lock on cursor decide to able to signify to able to let you know you can able to actually attack the cable, because once you deal with the actual cable, you can able to actually dish out as many of the health as you can for able to actually finish off the end for reals. So, but either way, there goes the forms of Supreme, and I think, relatively speaking, that was our 5th time fighting against with this guy. It seems kind of interesting because, seems to be more specifically, we somehow managed to fight against with most of those Titans multiple times. Like, for instance, during the course of the, well, the main game, alongside with the Battle Rush mode, and of course the infamous Master King Coco's Trial. And now we can able to actually just to be completely done with the forms of the regular Titan battles, at least for the most part. So, oh wait, that was quite a sight to behold. So, of course, we can now able to actually skip the actual cinematic scenes right now. So, at least thankfully though, we don't need to necessarily worry about just trying to able to like do some unskippable cutscenes, unlike the forms of how it does it on, let's just say in Kingdom Hearts 1 on the PlayStation 2. All the cutscenes are pretty much unskippable every time when if you do die and able to actually try again, which I found was a little bit annoying though, honestly. So, yeah, anyway, speaking of something related to Kingdom Hearts though, if you couldn't tell already, it was able to actually change the aiming reticle for that particular lock-on cursor. In order to do that, is that as soon as you're able to see that lock-on cursor decides to show up, basically you have to press one of the bumpers. It doesn't matter what particular controller you're going to be using on. It could be either be left bumper or the right bumper on the Xbox controller, or L1 and R1 on the PlayStation 4 or PS5 controllers, and especially noticeable on the Nintendo Switch version, it's like L and R buttons. And basically what that does is that you can able to actually switch between those different targets you want able to attack. So I think that's probably is the best strategy I can probably think about it. But honestly though, on hard mode, this particular fight is actually a lot of fun. Especially concerning that, like I said before, this is a massive improvement of the likes of how it does it on the base game. Because I'll just take this particular battle any day, not only because it was super satisfying to able to see this particular awesome pose, or awesome action shots for the sake of the forms of Supersonic 2, but also is about the fact that I still really love the actual music in the background. I mean, sure, it does sounds a little bit more representative, what have you, but either way, it looks like we're now on to the last phase again. So either way though, hopefully though, we'll try to succeed this time around though, especially noticeable because concerning we still need able to take down the cable before we're able to actually finish off the end completely. So But either way, though, yeah, that's as far as I can usually say about the forms of this, the true final boss battle, honestly. I mean, sure, it looks pretty awesome to me, though, so, but either way. So, that pretty much deals it from here. So, anyway, I could have possibly able to actually think about another thing I wanted, address onto something, but, until by that time, until tomorrow anyway, is that, Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget will be expected to be releasing until tomorrow on Netflix. So, I'm sure that most Chicken Run fans out there will be expected to be super excited about the films they've seen a sequel. So, even then, I'm sure I'll be able to fetch them a lot more popcorns and what have you. So, either way, though, I guess that pretty much summed up as the forms of how the fact that I'm just really looking forward to know of how the film is going to play out to be. So, but of course, we're probably not going to mention any spoilers for the time being until that particular film comes out. So, alright, so it looks like we basically almost dished out as many of the health as we could. Because obviously, no matter what though, since we've already maxed out our attack power, so we should be able to deal with this fight no problem. So, and of course, you need to be exactly at the perfect prey, not able to deal with those specific projectiles if you can tell. But I'm not very great at the forms of the perfect preying if he does like physical attacks, like for instance with that particular claw swipe. But that's just the way I feel about it, especially concerning for the fact that at the very least though, we are getting very close towards the end of this battle. So, and I mean, still, I had a really, really great time playing this game after all, even though despite some issues has been occurred for the past few moments worth noting for, most notably with this obnoxious pop-ups every once in a while, and I'm actually going to be decided talking over for this particular cinematic scene, because look how cool that particular moves was, and of course, just like Evolves of how it does on the base game, we need to deal with even more quick time events, so thankfully, there's only like 2 quick time events that we have to deal with right there. And as soon as you're done with that, well, that was it. The entire true final boss battle is pretty much done for good. So, yeah, and I do apologize for the fact that I have to talk over for this particular cutscene right there, because I'm a little bit worried about the fact that I might come across into yet another copyright strike again, because I know for a fact that for one thing in mind, that still, every once in a while is about the fact that copyright music decides they're able to kick things in every once in a while for the likes of the forms of the majority of, oh my god, what is going on here? It seems I'm almost going to be in a corrupted form, at least as far as I'm concerned. I mean, from the look of it anyway though, it is immediately satisfying whenever you do manage to able to like finish him off, and it looks like we're about to get fired for the sake of the forms of that particular gunshot. So, and wait for it, wait for it. Oh, wait a second, it looks like Eggman is about to able to get exactly a correct target, and fire! Look how awesome this looks. Especially, no matter what though, unlike the base game, thankfully, Sage does not sacrifice herself this time around, so, potentially speaking though, is that on the base game, I would classify for saying that was potentially the bad ending, whilst compared to in here though, it might actually consider this to be the best ending, so, and also this part right there kind of reminds me of Sonic Colors a little bit, except, well, he was in supersonic form, so, and that was it folks, that's the end of the Final Horizon DLC.
Look! There he is!
You did well, Sage. It's time to head home, dear daughter.
Home. I like the sound of that. Father.
And with that, Sonic Frontiers has finally concluded. And I'm gonna say, like I said before, it's been a crazy ride for the sake of the forms of how this Let's Play turns out to be. I mean, sure, not everything else is perfect by any means, with any stretch of the imagination, but regardless of everything else though, what's my final thoughts of the forms of Sonic Frontiers as a result? Well, before I get into that though, I just want to say, the good ending portion of the game, specifically how Eggman is finally get a chance to able to look after Sage for reals this time, makes it a little bit more of a worth it for the sake of the forms of the ending alone. Especially concerning for the fact that unlike the base game, it was technically the bad ending, just because the forms of Sage did sacrifice herself. But regardless of everything else though, yeah, that's what I can really think about it, I guess anyway. So, now if you're probably wondering, I was expecting to able to include the background music in the background for the sake of the forms of the credit sequence, but I've learned for that particular mistake from the likes of the forms of how it does it, since in the finale portion of the base game, that we've somehow come across into a copyright claim. So because of that, this is the only segment I got to mute for now, just because I really don't affect the actual copyright claims for the sake of the forms of this entire Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers in mind. So, despite I have to deal with some technical edits to do, but regardless of everything else though, is about the fact that, well, exponentially speaking, I was about the fact that, well, I know a lot of people are might able to actually concerning for me for saying this, but can I even still recommend this game, Sonic Frontiers, as a game itself? Of course I can, it's fantastic. But, on the other hand though, they do have some little bit of a critics for the sake of the forms of, you know, criticizing for the fact that, well, actually, let's get into the forms of my final thoughts of the forms of Sonic Frontiers as a result. First of all, I really enjoy the gameplay style for the sake of the forms of Sonic Frontiers. Like, I do enjoy the forms of a lot of exploration for the sake of the forms of certain islands to explore, and also it's filled to the brim with a lot of, like, open zone filtering, especially concerning that some people seem to say that this game is basically the Sonic's equivalent to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, except the noticeable differences being that you're able to run fast, and especially noticeable concerning for the fact that I will admit though, I do usually enjoy the combat system in this game when you try to deal with certain guardians as well as the forms of certain enemy types every once in a while, especially concerning for the fact that it feels a little bit more, well, rewarding as well as satisfying at the same time, rather than just becoming incredibly bare bones, unlike Sonic Boom Rise of Loic, where the actual combat mechanics wasn't nearly as satisfying as the forms of not only Sonic Frontiers, but also for Sonic Unleashed as well. So, yeah, relatively speaking, I do enjoy the combat system in this game, even though sometimes I will admit though is about the fact that I sort of able to actually become a little bit struggled for able to learn certain combos at one point, because I'm still pretty much used to with the spin dash at one point. So, and also I do really enjoy the musical set pieces in this game, especially concerning about the fact that it's almost like atmospheric for the sake of the forms of depending on what islands you go into. And on top of that, I do usually enjoy the cyberspace music every once in a while, especially noticeable with the forms of flowing into the light, which is usually taking place in during forms of being Kronos Island in World 1-2 or Cyberspace 1-2, despite the fact that getting the S rank on that particular level was actually a bit of a pain at first. So, but regardless of everything else though, that's as far as I can usually think about for the sake of the forms of the cyberspace stages, but either way though, and also the visuals, despite there are some technical pop-up errors from time to time, but I will admit though, the graphics do look very, very good, even depending on what system you're able to play it on, either on the PlayStation 4, or Xbox One, or Xbox Series X for that matter. Although, I'm sure no matter what though, is that the Switch version, despite it's a little bit rough around the edges from time to time, but I must say the Switch version, surprisingly enough, runs very, very well. Even though despite the phones, the graphics may look a bit in a low resolution sometimes. Oh, and by the way, something's worth noting for, if you beat in the forms of the Final Horizon DLC, you're able to actually see the exact same cutscene as you saw on the main base game. But there is one little difference I want to classify for saying this, and by the way, that line right there, what Amy said, that she mentions Styx from Sonic Boom, speaking of which, oh man, that was actually kind of crazy when Amy actually mentions, you know, Styx the Badger for, you know, continuity purposes or something. But there was one little difference is, if you couldn't tell, we're actually able to hear a background music if you couldn't tell. But much like the other credit sequence, I'm gonna have to mute that part because I just don't able to claim my copyright strike. So, either way though. And also, I feel like that the Titan fights is easily the greatest part about the game, especially because not only they're a lot more exhilarating, but it's also very intense as well, and on top of that, with the forms of this rocky music in the background, seriously, the Titan's boss fights are easily the best bosses in the entire Sonic history, especially you can able to play as Super Sonic for like multiple times throughout the majority of the entire game, ranging from, you know, Kronos Island all the way up to Aronos' Island, and including by the forms of the Final Horizon DLC update, despite the fact that you have to do with the forms of certain trials, like, quite a number of times. So, but I digress. And also, I will admit though, I actually really enjoyed the Big's fishing mechanic, and it certainly feels a little bit more relaxed, and especially noticeable, it's nowhere near as frustrating as the forms of how it does it on Sonic Adventure. Whenever you're trying to able to take care of the forms of level B missions or level A missions, my god, that was frustrating back then. Especially if you really want to get those remaining emblems, well, best of luck, I guess. So, oh, and also another thing too, I really like the sense of the humor in this game, especially it's way more, you know, it's nowhere near as like cheesy compared to the forms of how it does it back in during the forms of in Sonic Colors or Sonic Generations or anything else to be more specific. So it feels like no matter what though, it's about the fact that the writers is actually really well done for this game. And in addition to that though, it's about the fact that I love several references from the likes of the forms of Sonic's past, including by the forms of likely also let's just say for certain character mentions, like we've already discovered by the forms of in Styx the Badger, alongside with the Babylon Rogues, and especially noticeable with the forms of, I know there was technically Tangle that was also mentioned somewhere, but I couldn't find it anywhere, just because I tried to able to actually find it somewhere, but it's actually a lot harder as it seems. So, but anyway though, and in addition with the forms of another positive things I would like to mention, honestly, I think that's as far as I can usually say about the forms of the positive aspects. Oh, aside from the fact that I just love the ability to able to play not only one, but 4 different playable characters. Well, to be more specifically, you're still able to play as Sonic the whole way through. But during the course of a Final Horizon DLC update, you can able to actually play as not only Tails for the first time, since I would say in Sonic 06, and same applies with Knuckles and Amy Rose. So, yeah, pretty cool, especially noticeable concerning for the fact that it's almost getting like a, well, to be more specifically though, in terms of the 3D Sonic games, when it comes to playing those characters once again, since in Sonic 06. So, and even then, they're pretty fun to play through, despite Tails is a bit nerfed at points, mainly because he doesn't have a homing attack, unlike Amy and Knuckles, but that's what the positives end. So, in terms of negative things I can probably think about, well, there's only quite a few negative things I can think of, aside from the fact that I've already mentioned about the fact that sometimes the pop-ups might be a little bit irritating at points when it comes to draw distance, and also I feel like that the cyberspace stages are easily the weakest part of the game, mainly because they pretty much recycles the exactly same level designs as the forms of how it does it from the likes of, well, in terms of the layout and everything, that it heavily borrows from Sonic's past, ranging from Sonic Unleashed, as well as the forms of Sonic Adventure 2, and as well as the forms of maybe Sonic Generations, and I think also same applies with the other game I could probably think about on top of my head. Mind you, it's been a very long time since I actually come back onto the base game's cyberspace stages, but I will try to able to plan out to do that on the Xbox One version, but either way though, that's as far as I can usually think about it. So, oh, and another thing too, I despised the Master King Coco's trial because easily, without a doubt, that is the most frustrating trial I've ever experienced by far. And, yeah, screw that particular trial because I hate it. That could be also applies for the forms of the end from the likes of in a base game because, well, let's just say I'm not a big fan of the Ikaruka gameplay style. Oh, and another thing too, I'm really not a big fan of this pinball section in Chaos Island because that pretty much overstayed a welcome, especially because it requires the ridiculous amount of points, like 1 million points. That is so ridiculous if you ask me. But either way, aside from all that stuff though, yeah, that's as far as I can say about the forms of Sonic Frontiers as a result. So yes, let's save our game, and sure enough, we did it. Somehow, we've finally beaten Sonic Frontiers, and as a result, yeah, to complete this game, at least specifically if you want to include the base game and the Final Horizon DLC update, and also any other DLCs as well, it literally took me about 40 hours to able to complete the entire game. And gee, was it worth it? I suppose. But either way, do you want to know the reason why I haven't touched upon The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, including Pikmin 4 and Super Mario RPG Remake for some time? This game is why. Damn it, Sonic Team, especially concerning for the fact that, well, usually relatively speaking though, you always have to make me go through hardest parts, likely or so 3 hardest parts throughout the game. I mean, sure, some cyberspace stages can be felt a bit difficult at times, specifically 4-H for instance, but still, I was not expecting the forms of the difficulty spike will come to its fruition ever since enjoying the forms of Sonic Lost World for getting those, you know what I'm saying, the red star rings and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's as far as I can usually think about it. So, yeah, with that being said though, yeah, I was expecting to originally try to take care of the last few Guardians, but honestly, they're just for the sake of bragging rights. Oh, and if you beat the game, yeah, I realized there was actually the Battle Guard Guidance page has now been opened. So, yeah, that's what I can really think about it. So, yeah, that was it. That was our entire Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers. So, I hope you guys do enjoy this particular Let's Play, because I surely do, despite some issues I have with it. But apart from those side of things though, you should probably still able to recommend getting this game either on the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 or Xbox One or Xbox Series X/S. And even you can able to play the game on the go, either on PC, Steam Deck, or the forms of the Nintendo Switch. But either way though, you should probably able to recommend this game, which I still highly recommend this game entirely. So yeah, that's as far as I can usually think about it. So yeah, with that being said, this is me, Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and if I were you, I need to get my bandits ready, just for the sake of the forms of my palms of my hand. I'm now starting to get a little bit achy after a lot of frustration, so yeah, I need to deserve a rest for this point. So yeah, join us next time for the Sonic series of Let's Plays. Up next it will be Sonic Superstars, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.